Alright guys, so now we're on sides 5 and 6. So just to save a little bit of time, I have most of this set up already. But what I did after side 4 is I pulled the part off, I cleaned off the entire vise, I cleaned off the parallels, I deburred the part. So when I set it down, I can tap it down and you'll see the parallels are locked in place. They don't move around at all. Sides 5 and 6 require us to tap them down because now we're using all 3 of these sides, these 2 right here and the bottom, as reference surfaces. So we have to be ensured that they're laying flat against the parallels. So you tap it down on both ends. You'll also notice I've changed the tool. I've gone away from the facing mill because that's going to cut on top, and now I have side 5 hanging off the edge of the vise. The end mill that I'm going to use, the one thing you have to really be careful of is the length of the flutes, or how much cutting length we have right here. It has to span at least the thickness of the part that you're trying to cut. Otherwise you'll just be rubbing against the shank, or you won't be cutting the entire thing. So before I ever set anything up, or before I ever turn anything on, I'm going to bring the part right next to the cutter, and I'm going to make sure that my end mill is far enough or down enough so that it goes all the way past the bottom of the part and it still has cutting edges up above the top of the part. And you'll notice this end mill is just big enough to do this job. I could go with a little bit longer one, but the shorter the end mill, the more stable it is as well. So I have this coming out, and we've talked about this before, but you shouldn't really have more than a couple inches hanging out of the quill. So I adjusted it, I locked it down. Now if I had this much hanging out of the quill, I'd want to raise the table up instead. Now a couple inches is fine, but when you start getting 3, 4, 5 inches, there's too much play in there for it to be accurate. So you want to only have a little bit hanging out of the quill here. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this thing on, and it's going to repeat the same process you guys are used to, just with a different tool. I'm going to take a small facing cut, 10 thousandths or so off of side 5. I'm going to flip it and take the rest off of side 6. And so when I take a little bit off of side 5, the one thing you just got to pay attention to is I have about a 1/4 inch hanging off the edge of the vise. If you set it even with the vise, you're going to take a cut out of the vise, which I don't really like you guys to do. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and turn the machine on. Okay, make sure I'm away from the part a little bit. I'm going to turn this on. I've already readjusted my RPM based on the calculations that we've gone over. So I'm going to go ahead and touch off my tool just like you're used to. So I bring it over using my X-axis at this point. I'm just on the part a little bit. I'm going to bring it over towards the front, touch it off. Okay, and I'm going to bring it off the part. So I touched it off, I bring it off the part. You'll see a little bit of chips flying. Alright guys, so I just touched off the X-axis on the end of the part. Now instead of using the micrometer dial that we were using for the Z-axis, we can actually start using our digital readout. And so I'm going to do the same thing, except now it's digital. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit X0, and you'll see it resets to 0, just like I would have done on the micrometer dial, so that I know how much I'm taking. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to crank this in so that it's taking a 10 thousandths cut. And you'll notice up here, there's a couple of extra digits. So I really want you guys to not worry too much about these last 2 digits on this one, and some you just don't worry about the last. You're really only worried about the first 3. Those are the thousandths we're talking about. So you may think I just moved 118 thousandths, but really I only moved 1 thousandth. And so I'm going to go ahead, pay attention only to the first 3 decimals, and I'm going to go until it says 10. Right there. Okay, and if I look over here, I'm actually at 10 and 2/10, but like I said, I'm not worried about those last couple of digits right there. Just I'm taking 10 thousandths, and I'm going to see how that cleans up. Now there is one more difference with this. Now that I'm cutting on the side, the X-axis is going to want to move on me, and so it's always a good idea at this point to lock the axis down so it can't drift, because I'm only going to be working with Y-axis now. So I'm going to go ahead and snug up my locks so that when I'm cutting, it's not pulling apart one way or another. And then I'm going to just nice and slow take this cut. And remember, we talked about climbing conventional milling. I'm going to make sure that as the cutter's rotating, I'm going against the direction of the cut. So I'm starting in the back with the part and I'm coming forward. You'll notice the shavings on this are a little bit finer than what we had before. I'm just going to go until it's all the way off. I'm going to check it and see that it cut all the way. Now if I look closely, to be honest, I actually see the 5 a little bit still. So I'm going to take about another 5 thousandths. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my machine back on. I'm going to move it back to the front. And then I'm going to set my X, I'm going to go to 15 thousandths instead of 10. And that's a case where it didn't quite clean up as much as I wanted it to. So I'm looking at only the first 3 digits and I'm going to 15. Okay, right there. I'm going to go ahead and lock my X back down. And I'm going to take my last cut. Now this should be good. So I took 10 thousandths for the first one. It wasn't quite enough, so I didn't take a full another 10. I'm only taking 5. Okay, I'm going to turn off the machine, and that side's good. 2, 3. Alright guys, so right now I've deburred side 5. I flipped it over, I've cleaned it. I haven't tightened the vise down yet. And the reason is I want to show you that you have to kind of have an idea of how much you have to take off of this part when you set up for side 6. Because if you have to take off 200 or 300 thousandths and you only leave 100 thousandths hanging out of the end of the vise, you're going to end up having to reset, or again, you're going to cut into the vise, and we don't want to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and check real fast, get a rough idea of where I'm at. So I'm at about 2.480, and I want to be at 2.375. So I have roughly 100 thousandths to take off. And 100 thousandths, if you guys can't visualize it, is about that big right there. So as long as I have more than that hanging off the end of the vise, I'll be okay for this part. But each part, it's going to change a little bit. So I'm going to hang off maybe about 250 or 1/4 of an inch right there. I'm going to tighten it down. And then remember, like I said, 5 and 6 need to be tapped down to make sure it's square and parallel to the vise. So I bring it away to where I can hit it. Try not to hit the machine. Make sure it locks down. Okay, both sides have locked down. The other thing with the parallels is make sure they don't come much past the actual vise, because if you cut into those, that's a problem also, which I feel it coming past a little bit, so I'm going to tap it back. Make sure it stayed locked down. It did. They're both locked down. So I'm going to go ahead and touch this off, get myself a good measurement surface so I can figure out exactly what I have left to take. So same process as before. Crank it up towards the front, because we're going to go back to front, so I touch off towards the front of the part until it contacts. Okay, I bring it off the part. I'm going to zero out my x-axis. Take 10 thousandths. Again, only these first 3 digits worry about. That's 10. I'm going to lock down my X, and I'm going to take the cut. Okay, I'm going to turn it off and get a good measurement for it now. Now remember, you don't want to measure right at the edges. That's where a burr is sitting at the moment. I'm not going to deburr it, but I'm going to make it so that the jaw of the caliper is fully on just the side. Okay, and not over up on the edge or over on this edge. Fully on the side so that I can get an accurate measurement. So if I look at this, I'm at 2.466. So if I do the math for that, 2.466 minus the 2.375 that it's supposed to be tells me I need to take off 91 thousandths, 0.091. So right now, before I do anything else, I'm going to re-zero out X, because that's my new zero, and I'm going to take off enough to get to 91 thousandths. Now here's where you have to use a little bit of judgment and realize that just because you can take up to 50 thousandths with any of our cutters, doesn't mean it's always a good idea to. Right now I'm using all of the length of this cutter, and so it may be a little bit too much to take off 50 thousandths. So I'm going to take a little bit less and see how it goes. So the one thing I do want to do, remember, we're going to cut back to front, is I'm going to come over here and do conventional milling. So I'm just going to come up, and I'm going to take a 50 thousandths cut. So if it doesn't move on you, realize that you have the X locked. I'm going to come over here, and I'm not going to take quite a 50 thousandths cut like I just said. I'm going to maybe take about 25, see how it goes. And I just want to get to 91, so I don't have that much to take off, so I'd rather take a little extra time and have it be good. Okay, so that's 25 thousandths. It's kind of heavy. I can feel it in the hand wheel. You can hear it. So I'm not going to take any more than 25 thousandths. So this will end up being 25, 50, 75, and then I'll figure out the last couple of thousandths until 91. Okay, once I'm off that end, I'm just going to come right back so I can start off on this side. I'm going to go to 50, on the digital readout. Okay, so I go until it says 50. Now if I hit 51, it's not the end of the world at this point. 50, 51, that's okay. These are all roughing passes. So I'm not going to worry about resetting it to 50. I'm going to go ahead and take this pass. Now at this point I might give it a real quick check on size. I took off 51 thousandths, so really I should be around 40 thousandths left to take off. So I'm going to see how that worked out for me. So if I want it to be at 2.375, I'm at 2.415. That means I'm 40 thousandths exactly oversized. Now it worked. Everything's good, but it's always good to double check. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back on, come back to the front. Okay, I'm going to loosen up my x-axis. I'm going to move to 75 thousandths on my readout right here. Okay, lock it back down. And here goes this pass. Okay, come right back. 75 to 91 is about 16 thousandths. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I always say about 5 to 15 thousandths for a finish pass. 16 is not going to break it. So I'm going to go ahead and go straight to 91 at this point. Just remember only the first 3 digits. Okay, I actually overshot it a little bit, so I'm going to reapproach it. Okay, so I'm at 0.091. Lock my x-axis back down. I'm going to take this cut. Now a little trick to help out with the surface finish after I do this cut, since it's a little heavier than my normal 10. I'm just going to go ahead and go back, and that'll be it. Leave it alone. Go ahead and turn the machine off. I'm going to check for heat, make sure it's not too hot. Now it is pretty hot to the touch, so I'm going to leave it in there. But I do want to just double check the size and show you guys that hopefully everything worked the way it should have. So I'll leave it right in the machine, and I should be right around 2.375. If I come over here, you're going to see that I'm right on. Everything's exactly the way it should be. And that's it. You would deburr the last couple of sides, and that's all for squaring up an entire block.